In this part of the series of lectures by the Delhi Law Academy on the Constitution of India, we shall be discussing the provisions contained in Articles 52 to 75 dealing with the Union Executive. These provisions relate to the President, the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, and it shall be my endeavour to explain these provisions in question-answer form. Here is the first question. Who elects the President of India? And here is the answer. The President of India is elected by number 1, elected members of both houses of parliament, and number 2, elected members of state legislative assemblies including Delhi and Puducherry. Two things need to be noted here. Firstly, only the elected members of parliament will be taking part, and similarly only the elected members of state legislative assemblies will be taking part in this election. And secondly, the legislative assemblies of Delhi and Puducherry will also be participating, even though Delhi and Puducherry are not states, they are union territories. Question 2. Who decides disputes relating to the election of president? And the answer as contained in Article 71 is this. Disputes relating to the election of the president shall be inquired into and decided by the Supreme Court of India. Question 3. How many times can a president be re-elected? The answer is simple. A president in India can be re-elected any number of times. As far as the Constitution is concerned, there is no limit as to the number of times a person can contest an election for the President of India. Practically, there has been only one occasion when a sitting president was re-elected, that was in 1957. The only president to have been re-elected happens to be Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and thereafter no president was ever re-elected. Next question. What are the qualifications for a person to contest the election of the president? There are 4 qualifications. Number 1, he should be a citizen of India. Second, he should be at least 35 years of age. Third, he should be qualified to be elected to the Lok Sabha. Here it needs to be noted that the person who wants to contest the election to the post of the President of India need not himself be a member of the Lok Sabha. The only requirement is that he should be qualified to be elected to Lok Sabha. And the 4th qualification is that he should not hold any office of profit under the government or any authority under government control. Next question. Which constitutional authority has been entrusted with the onerous task of protecting and defending the Constitution? There is no direct answer to this question, and therefore we will have to infer an answer from the provisions of the Constitution. The relevant provision is Article 60, and Article 60 lays down the content of the oath which the President takes, and from this content we see that he undertakes to preserve, protect and defend the Constitution. And therefore our answer to that question will be the content of the oath prescribed in Article 60 shows that it is the President of India who has been entrusted by the Constitution to protect and defend the Constitution. Next question. In which constitutional authority is the executive power of the Union vested and how is it to be exercised? The executive power of the Union is vested in the President of India under Article 53, and he shall exercise this power either directly or through subordinate officers, and further he shall exercise this power in accordance with this Constitution. This last provision shows that there will be some provision in the Constitution which will guide the President in the exercise of his powers, and that provision, as we shall subsequently see, is Article 74, which lays down that the President shall act in as per the advice given by the Council of Ministers. Next question. What matters are included in the executive power of the Union? What is meant by the executive power of the Union? This term is explained or defined in Article 73 of the Constitution, and this is what is provided there. The matters which are included in the executive power of the Union are the following. Firstly, all matters enumerated in the Union list. The Union list, as contained in Schedule 7 of the Constitution, originally contained 97 entries. As of now, it contains 98 entries, and all those matters which are enumerated in this list fall within the executive power of the Union. And as we saw in the last question, the executive power of the Union is vested in the President of India. And as we also saw, this executive power is to be exercised by the President in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, namely Article 74, which mandates that he shall exercise this power as per the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So the first item in the executive power of the Union is all matters enumerated in the Union list. The second item, those matters in the concurrent list which are expressly so included by the Constitution or Parliament. So some matters in the concurrent list do fall in the executive power of the Union, and other matters in that list fall in the executive power of the state. Which matters fall in the concurrent list and which matters fall in the Union list, that will be seen from those express provisions in the Constitution or the Parliament where this specification is made. And the third item included in the executive power of the Union is rights and authority by virtue of any treaty or agreement with other countries. Next question. How shall the President exercise his powers? We have already seen the answer to this question. To be precise, the answer is the President shall exercise his powers. Which powers? The executive powers of the Union. So the answer is the President shall exercise his powers with the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, with the Prime Minister at the head. He shall act in accordance with such advice. This is what Article 74 provides. However, the President may return the advice for reconsideration once, but the subsequent advice will be binding on the President. Next question. Who can be appointed a minister in the Union Council of Ministers? Answer. Any person who has not been disqualified as a member of Parliament under the 10th schedule can be appointed a minister. He shall, however, cease to be a minister if he is not a member of Parliament for a continuous period of 6 months. To begin with, any person can be appointed a minister. There is no requirement, no qualification at the initial stage. The only requirement is that such minister must become a member of Parliament within a period of 6 months. If he fails to become a member of Parliament within this period of 6 months, then he will cease to be a minister. As far as the initial appointment is concerned, there is no qualification mentioned in Article 75. However, one disqualification is mentioned, and that disqualification is this, that any person who was a member of Parliament and thereafter he was disqualified under the 10th schedule of the Constitution, such a person cannot be appointed a minister till the term of that house. Now, what is the 10th schedule? The 10th schedule contains provisions relating to the defection. So, any member of Parliament who has been disqualified under the anti-defection law as contained in the 10th schedule, he will be disqualified to become a minister. Anybody else is qualified provided he becomes a member of parliament within the period of 6 months thereafter. What is the maximum number of ministers in the Union Council of Ministers? The answer is straightforward. 15% of the total members of Lok Sabha. And this number includes the Prime Minister also. So the Union Council of Ministers, including the Prime Minister, cannot exceed 15% of the total members of the Lok Sabha. What is meant by the collective responsibility of the Union Council of Ministers to the Lok Sabha? This collective responsibility is provided in Article 75, Clause 3 of the Constitution. The question is, what is meant by this collective responsibility? The Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. That is what the provision provides. What is the meaning of this provision? The meaning is this. The Union Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha, which means it can be removed as a whole by the House of People by passing a no confidence motion. In what cases can the President grant pardon? This pardoning power of the President is contained in Article 72 of the Constitution, and this article provides that the President can grant pardon to any person who is convicted by a court-martial or who is convicted of any offence against a law on a matter which falls within the executive power of the Union, or thirdly, any person who has been sentenced to a sentence of death. One point which needs to be noted here is that this power of the President to grant pardon comes into play only after the conviction. This cannot come while the matter is pending trial before a court. So once a conviction is made, once the court finds him guilty, once the court convicts that person, thereafter the President can exercise this power. And in which cases this power can be exercised? All convictions made by a court-martial, that is courts which are established under the Defence Forces Acts. Secondly, all convictions under an offence which is against a law on a matter specified within the executive power of the Union. And lastly, all cases of death sentences. President has the power to grant pardon in respect of all cases of death sentences. What is the effect of a presidential pardon? In a case where the President pardons, what is the effect on that person who has been pardoned? This is the answer. The grant of pardon wipes off the guilt of the convict and brings him to the original position of innocence as if he had never committed the offence for which he was convicted. What it means is that the convict gets a clean slate. His guilt is wiped off, and for the record, it will be presumed that he had never committed any offence. Therefore, the grant of pardon affects both the punishment as well as the guilt of the offender. Guilt will be wiped off, the punishment will be wiped off. Can there be a judicial review of the clemency powers of the President? Can the constitutional courts of India, that is the Supreme Court and the High Courts, judicially review the exercise of the pardoning power made by the President? The answer is yes. However, this judicial review is only to a limited extent. The answer is a limited judicial review of exercise of the clemency powers is available to the Supreme Court and the High Courts, and this was so held by the Supreme Court in Sudhakar versus Government of Andhra Pradesh. What is the procedure for impeachment of the President? Impeachment means removal of the President. So what is the procedure for removal of the President? This procedure for impeachment of the President is provided in Article 61 of the Constitution. the procedure is as under. In step 1, charge is preferred, and this preferring of charge can be done by either House of Parliament. But before the House assembles, a 14 days prior notice has to be given, and this prior notice must be signed by at least 1/4 members of that particular House. For preferring the charge, a resolution has to be passed by this House, and this resolution has to be passed with a special majority, and that special majority is not less than 2/3 of the total membership of the House. For example, if the House is the Lok Sabha, the total membership of Lok Sabha is 545. So for preferring the charge against the President, at least 2/3 members out of the total membership of 545 should vote in favor of preferring the charge. Thereafter, stage 2 begins, and that is the investigation of the charge. The charge which has been preferred by the first House shall be investigated by the second House, and this House will be called as the investigating House. At the end of the investigation, this House will need to pass a resolution, and this resolution must be passed by the same special majority, that is a majority of not less than 2/3 of the total membership of the House. And if this resolution is passed with this special majority, then the President shall stand removed. Next, who discharges the functions of the President when there are vacancies in the offices of both the President and the Vice President? We are aware that when the office of the President is vacant, then it is the Vice President who discharges the functions of the President. The question says, if there are vacancies in the offices of both the President and the Vice President, who will discharge the functions of the President? Does the Constitution have any provision which deals with this contingency? The answer lies in Article 70 of the Constitution, which empowers the Parliament to make provision for discharge of the functions of the President in any contingency which has not been provided for in the Constitution. Actually, this contingency of the offices of both the President and Vice President falling vacant has not been actually provided for anywhere in the Constitution. But this article empowers the Parliament to make provision and to decide as to who will discharge the functions of the President in such a contingency. However, this decision and this provision can be made by Parliament only by making a law, and under this provision, under Article 70, Parliament has enacted a law in the year 1969. This law is known as the President Discharge of Functions Act. So our answer will be, while exercising its powers under Article 70 of the Constitution, the Parliament enacted the President Discharge of Functions Act in 1969 for this contingency. And what is that provision? We shall presently see. This Act provides as under. Firstly, in the event of vacancies in the office of both the President and the Vice President, the Chief Justice of India shall discharge the functions of the President. Secondly, if the Chief Justice of India is absent, then the senior most judge of the Supreme Court available shall discharge the functions of the President.